Hi, everyone. I'm Laura back with the Eden Alternative. So glad that you're joining us today. I'm super excited to introduce you to our panel. I'm going to just start out by telling you a little bit about everybody, and then we're just going to dive into the conversation just like we always do. And so first off, we have Nicole Brackett, who is Care, Delivery, and Education Manager with Home Watch Caregivers, and that is headquarters in Denver, Colorado. Nicole graduated from the Academy of Health Sciences Command at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and has been a nurse in the long-term care space for over 29 years. And she's also a certified Eden educator, and her passion is mentoring and teaching others to provide top quality elder care. So I'm so glad you're here, Nicole. And next is Anne-Marie Cook, who is president and CEO for Lifespan of Greater Rochester, an aging service provider in upstate New York. Anne-Marie serves on many community boards and is co-chair of the New York State Coalition on Elder Abuse. She also serves on Senator Gillibrand's working group on the aging and is the former chair of the New York State Coalition on Aging. And so welcome, Anne-Marie. And Kaylee Burke is director and co-founder of Harvest Home Care in Missoula, Montana. And Kaylee's passion for elder care advocacy is truly a family affair. In high school, she took her first job in the kitchen of the nursing home that her mother worked in and turned that experience into a 20-year career in aging services. Inspired by her brother, Kevin Peterson, who is known and loved by many of us, Kevin's national activism in changing the long-term care system inspired Kaylee to join him and to help bring culture change to home care in her hometown of Missoula, Montana. So thank you for being here, Kaylee. Love it. It's so great to meet you finally. So glad you guys are here. We've had a lot of conversations here on Eden Alternative Live in the past about the impact of COVID, COVID from the very beginning of the pandemic and COVID now as we're dealing with the Delta. But we've been talking about it in terms of specific experiences along the spectrum of aging services, and we haven't really had a conversation yet about what the unique challenges are and the unique impacts to home care. And so that's why we've brought together this Power Pack panel today to see if they can shed some light on this specific subject for us. So I'm just going to dive in, everyone, with the first question. And here we go. Pretty much piggybacks on what I just said. What unique challenges does COVID-19 pose for home-based care and support? And then sort of a secondary question to that is, what do we need to watch for? And in response, what proactive steps should we take now? So which one of you would like to take a stab at beginning the conversation with this question? Feel free to unmute.
Well, Laura, I'd be happy to start. I think COVID, is a unique kind of thing in that it has impacted all of us. And certainly in home care, what we saw in our community was at first a decrease, believe it or not, in referrals, is I think people were trying to figure out what's going on. Was this a couple week kind of situation? And they were afraid of infection. And then, of course, what we saw was an explosion of cases as people were rejecting really long-term care, looking for more home-based options. And I think, we have seen a struggle of workforce shortage issues here. And in some of the home-based care, as we've struggled to get people connected, we see older adults isolated. So, it runs the gamut, I think, of what we've seen in home-based care since COVID hit.
I agree. This is Kaylee. Hello. And to follow up with that, number one, I just want to say thank you for having this conversation with the in-home care world. I do feel like that in itself has been an issue in this whole pandemic. Is we have found how separate we truly are in this healthcare industry, the non-skilled versus the skilled. How do we work together? And feeling a sense of being left out to a degree. So we really discovered a lot of challenges that I think we all knew existed to a level, but with this pandemic, I think it just heightened how separate we really are, and how we have to fight a little bit differently to have a voice in it. So definitely staffing challenges. We also experienced the first kind of halt in services. Where do we go? We can't go to nursing homes right now, but I don't want anybody in home. And same with staff being afraid to work in the field as well. So we definitely were hit hard. And then that mass inundation of the need. And now the need's so high, the demand, but the supply we're dealing with now. So it's really interesting. But I think there's so many other unique challenges for in home care, non-skilled, particularly in this pandemic.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Ann and Kaylee. For home care, it was very difficult to find people that wanted to work in the industry because of the pandemic. And, so staffing was definitely an issue. I think people were really made to feel at ease once they knew that they had the proper amount of PPE available to them. While PPE is not foreign to home care, it was very unique in how we had to use it a little differently, be more aware. For people going in and out of the home of elders, it was that our care providers were really filled with a little bit of anxiety because of the people coming and going out of the people's houses and putting them at an exposure. So definitely had some increased staffing concerns as we went along the way. I think it really helped us with a unique, renewed focus on the importance of infection control and, standard precautions. It's always something that we teach, but it was definitely a renewed focus of education. And that, is my goal as a trainer, is just to make sure that people are up to speed with what needs to be done. And so having a pandemic really brought about the necessity of making sure people had the proper equipment to safely provide care, and to also have that education and that ongoing awareness of how important that was.
And if I could add to what Nicole was speaking on about, this complete need to educate and stay on top of safety and protocols, even though, again, we are not unfamiliar with that in the healthcare world. But it really, I think, a challenge that presented itself with that is this: we as Eden educators and philosophy changers, our dedication to the well-being aspect of healthcare really shifted into, kind of seemed more status quo, into task and safety. And so really feeling like our main goals as leaders were crisis managers and educators into this pandemic, and finding a way to balance still the well-being aspect and relationship building aspect became really challenging. But overall, in home care, just hasn't had the national conversation the way skilled industry has around what we've dealt with. We're having similar conversations on a different, more intimate level than maybe bigger nursing homes and hospitals, with staff, with families who we're constantly trying to educate them as well to follow safety protocols and rules. And we're not always, as leaders, in their home and see everything, where when you're in a big building, you kind of see all things. It's hard to hide. It's hard to figure, maybe skirt the lines. There's a lot more challenges in the conversation in home care that just aren't really being talked about. So this is great.
No, I really appreciate that. And, this is just something that's coming up for me right now as I'm listening to all of you, is when we're talking about crisis management in a pandemic, for example, or I guess any kind of crisis, in home care, when people are sort of scattered to the four winds, right? I mean, like you said, they're not in four walls where you can find everybody and kind of come together and huddle and be responsive together in the moment. What are some of the ways that maybe you were either in touch with how people were dealing with that? What were some of the conversations maybe you picked up on about how that was addressed? And I mean, I realize that some of you are more on the front line than others, and just curious, from whatever perspective you come from.
Well, I think, Laura, it has taught us to use technology better. there were a lot of times in which, to get the support we all needed, we have mastered Zoom and other technological things, and that was our way of huddling with staff often when we could not huddle in the office. I think it's one of those things that'll never go away. And I think certainly there has been a focus on the mental health and the stress. And I think that the way to help support people is to talk about it first. And I think that those conversations are occurring. So some of the, I think, intense stress may lead to some positives later on as we look at the important work that's done. And I just want to piggyback on one thing Kaylee said, which is so true, that home care has been outside really of what's been traditionally the healthcare system. And I think we saw the importance of it. Now, I don't know if we've solved it, but we've certainly seen the importance of it as skilled nursing kind of closed their doors, as people looked for the choice of home care rather than skilled care because of things that were going on. And we need to figure out how to tighten that gap better.
Yeah. Love that.
I think it's also important to remind the world in the healthcare world that in home care entities and their teams, we're champions of you, of those who work endlessly in the hospitals and the clinics and in the nursing homes. Majority of our workers came from those entities and have that experience and wanted to try in a different light in a different way. But we are believers in you and we want to be here with you. And so we're loud on the sidelines, but definitely haven't had that light either. So yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, a big part of it.
And I'll just piggyback off of that as well. I think for us, we did see quite the uptick. I mean, we had a lot of requests for home care. And, when people were, skilled nursing facilities were kind of in the, shut down mode and people were on hold getting into those facilities, they would reach out to home care and community-based services to, keep their loved ones safe and secure in place until, the opportunity for them to move into an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility if need be. We were that safe haven for them. And so, as Kaylee mentioned, we are definitely proponents of and cheerleaders of the places that we were able to put that stopgap in and be able to come in and step in and provide those services. So definitely a huge partnership with all of that. I think for me, to piggyback a little bit off of what Anne Marie said, it became quite apparent to us quite quickly that not only the infection control and staffing issues, but it was really, it heightened the awareness of how isolation and loneliness hit people during the pandemic. And it was, it elevated quite quickly. And so people feeling those pains of the human spirit and how we could step in and really elevate things and bring the attention to that more person-directed approach to care during this time. Something we always do, but just the need was there to really utilize technologies like Zoom, to bring people together and address some of those issues that people were seeing.
All right. Thank you all. Rich topic. I imagine we're going to go down many different bunny trails here as we proceed. And so the next thing I just want to throw out there, which might be connected to what we were just talking about, is how has navigating the pandemic revealed any shifts or developments in home and community-based care that surprised you from your unique vantage point? And of that surprise, what new awareness, came up for you?
Well, I'll start again, Laura, if that's okay. I think what surprised me is just the sheer number of people that can stay home longer. And because it was the preferred option, people made it work with a combination of home care, with family support, with maybe other neighbors and friends, that families felt that was the best option. The older adult felt that was the best option, and they were staying home longer than I've ever seen people stay at home. I mean, I've been in the business 25 years, and I think we have some folks who really have multiple chronic conditions and figuring out a way to live in the place they want to live longer. And I think it'll have implications for the future. I think that's the choice people may make.
And you're certainly in a unique position to see how people were able to cobble together services in a way to make that happen, right? As you're the area agency on aging, correct? In the Rochester area, or no?
Well, we're a private nonprofit that do all the services of an area agency on aging.
That was my understanding anyway. So yes, absolutely can see how much of a surprise that might have been for you, and how encouraging just knowing that people are actually accessing the services they need to make something happen when it feels like the options are limited. So I do like hearing that people were able to make that work out for them. So, all right, who else wants to comment on this one?
I will add, for me, I feel some of the surprising events were, and I think these are kind of difficult things to talk about, but was how many people left the field in general, and the unemployment we're just barely, coming out of, and people still continuing to the fear of staying in this, but the exhaustion of working in this field in general, and then trying to survive through the pandemic. And so just surprising how drastically the recruitment changed and the applications for us. I mean, we were in a position of hiring, quite a few people each week, at least one or two a week, to having 0 applications for 6 months. And then the continuation of the decline. And so that was surprising to me. And maybe similarly, the folks who, and there's a lot of reasons why people had to leave, and some of them are extremely legit. But those who persevered and who managed and who found different ways to stay at home with their loved ones, found ways to stay at work and doing this line of work. And I think there's a lot of strength within that to tap into, but surprising overall with staffing in general. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Kaylee said. That was definitely a huge a surprise, a fear that we were going to enter the need to try to look beyond the traditional ways to recruit people to fill the positions. And I think one thing that came about of us is like really stretching our creativity and what kinds of people outside of our industry would be interested in coming in, and what tools did we need to give them to be able to be successful in this environment, and really calling out in our recruitment messages, that we had the education to provide them to enter this industry and provide great care, and also that we did secure the amount of PPE that they could safely provide care. And some of that was very unique to what other industries were providing for individuals. So, it gave us the opportunity to really kind of think outside of the box of, the hourly worker and how we could bring them up to speed to be able to provide great services.
Yes, we found that following all the industries that were not able to work, the restaurant industries, the service industries, we were campaigning for those folks. If you have a big heart and you want to stay active and work, we're in a non-skilled entity, so we get to work with a majority of people and teach and educate. They don't have to have that license, the CNA license, even though we love the experience. But we're kind of lucky in that aspect as a non-skilled entity to be able to tap in maybe to some of those. And we were able to get a handful, not enough, but a handful. And so the recruitment became different, how we were able to, hold space for a new worker, a new mindset of folks coming in, which was really exciting, actually.
So this is really cool to hear. And I'm wondering, in terms of those recruitment that you said, oh my gosh, we're going to go for it, see what it turns up. You're going to keep them? Do you feel like, hey, this really worked? Pandemic or no, I'm going to keep, having these kinds of conversations? Just curious, what about those new strategies would you hold on to?
For me, I feel like it's something we would continue to think outside the box on and continue to recruit. I will have to say that the majority of folks who came to us in the interim of not being able to work in their old jobs, it was temporary for a lot of them. But they enjoyed the experience, and some of them stayed with both us and went back to their job. So it was an interesting combination. And I think it's so worthy of continuing thinking down this road, because honestly, I think every living human should be a care partner at some point in their life, no matter if it's long-term or partially. I just think at some point, everybody should get involved. So it was very important, I think.
I love that. It's a little bit like the adage. Have you heard everyone should wait tables at least once in their life? Exactly. These are good life skills. It doesn't matter who you are. And absolutely, as we, move into a future with a burgeoning aging population, if only we were all ready, and even better from the perspective of person-directed care. I know I'm throwing some things at you you weren't expecting to hear, so just roll with it. That brings me to another question before we get back to our agreed upon questions. How did your relationship with person-centered and person-directed care help you, during this time, maybe in terms of recruiting people or keeping, staff morale up? Obviously, there's no question that it's key to quality care, but also know how challenged people felt in aging services to not, get run over by that runaway train that wants to go back to the old ways, right? So that we're safe. Just curious, how did it serve you?
I thought, Laura, the philosophies and the values of Eden came through strong actually during COVID, of person-centered care. And what happened to us in aging services were a lot of the regulations or the regular stuff you had to do were suspended in our state, I'm sure many other states. And so that actually gave us a unique opportunity to serve people the way they wanted to be served. And, I know our staff would be out there and they'd come back and they would say, Anne-Marie, we have people that need food. They can't pick up their prescription drugs. They need support of home care. And, you could say at that moment, go do it. And go do it. If you have to buy them food, buy them food. If you have to pick up their prescription drugs, do it. Just do what needs to be done. And it was in the midst of this chaos and crisis, it was a beautiful opportunity to live the values of Eden and do just person-directed services and exactly what people needed. That was a shining light in sort of this dark, very time we were feeling.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, I think from the very beginning of entering into in-home care for us, we immediately knew the only way to succeed is to build those relationships, to make this about their journey, their agenda, our elders, the staff, not necessarily ours as a business entity. And so I feel that completely saved us in this pandemic. And it was a light in the dark because we had a trust built within the elders we worked with, their family members, the staff. We knew each other intimately. From the moment we interview them, we are learning about each other and engaging and then and it goes on from there. So yes, the isolation during the time really didn't help, and the ability to come together, but we were able to, we always had an open door and always had autonomy for our staff and our elders. And that never stopped. And that became very prevalent in the work we did. And like Anne-Marie said, whatever you need to do, we're here to support you. Let's do that. Let's do it together.
Mm-hmm. What I love about that is that we're saying that out loud here. I mean, certainly one of the things that we've heard in our conversations engaging representatives of long-term care was how hard it felt to keep everyone connected to the fact that person-directed care will undoubtedly support your efforts to prevent infection. And, there was that tendency for people to want to kind of fall back to more institutional practices, thinking that's the only way to be truly safe. And it's like, we can't say it enough. We can't say it enough that this is actually exactly what we need at times like this. So those responses are very helpful. I really appreciate it. Okay. So getting back to where we were, what strengths? So we're kind of hitting on some of those, so we can think of some other strengths. How about that? What strengths do you see emerging now as a result of all of this? Maybe something a little different, and maybe it piggybacks off of what we've been playing with, that you think home and community-based services should continue to build on. Like we talked about the recruitment piece. What else? What else comes to mind?
I'd like to start out with that. I think kind of like as we were talking, it's like an extension of the conversation about really diving down to that person-directed approach to care. Sure, we have assistants that we need to help with, like tasks that need to be done in the home and such, but it really brought to the forefront, like I said earlier, the need to address the pains of the human spirit when we think about the technology we use to connect people, about really remembering what it's like to make sure that the elder still continues to have a voice in their care as we customize that care plan, and making sure that they're still involved in their care, along with, customizing the social engagement. The social history of a person continues to need to be a part of a care plan, a plan of care, an approach to care. And so when I think about customizing that socialization, that it needs to be close to the person, it really kind of renewed how we built a care plan, and making sure that we sprinkled that variety and spontaneity to make sure that we were addressing that we weren't only doing that. The other thing that I think really we always strive at Home Watch caregivers to have staffing consistency, making sure that people are put together with that same care partner as much as possible. And so we did see, not only because that kept them safe from exposure, but just that continuity of care really does build those relationships that are long lasting, and that really will hopefully secure retention on both your elder as well as your employee. Is just making those connections. And I hope that that is something that we continue to carry on throughout long past the pandemic.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, Nicole, where that comes from is, and a strength that home and community-based services entities, I think, have and can continue to grow, is their sense of community. We are usually smaller than a larger entity as a nursing home or assisted living or hospital. And if you are building your platform to allow your staff and elders to have a voice, you're really building that community. And so I think we have a lot to offer in this field and to learn from. And the strength is within those relationships and in that community, and allowing that Eden way to really take force.
Now, I couldn't agree more with Nicole and Kaylee. And, during this last couple months, we've actually been having focus groups with older adults about a variety of things. And boy, they could not wait to tell us exactly what worked and what didn't work. And it was wonderful in so many ways to hear their voice, exactly what Nicole said, picking up that person-directed services. And we're going to use that. And I hope we use it at a larger level. And I want to go back to earlier conversation that both Nicole and Kaylee said about, being in home care or aging services like I am, and being connected better to the whole service system. So I keep thinking we need a systems integration approach. We have to use the voice of people who had to go through things during COVID and start saying we need to connect these systems better so that people can receive the support, receive the services they need when they need them, and we do it better. So I hope we learn.
Laura, can I add one more touch here from the perspective of a strength that came out of this? I think we have a network full of caring owners throughout our industry, and they employ unique and great caregivers. And I think one of the strengths that came out of this is just the awareness of the wellness of the employee along with the elder. And just some of the things that were implemented that we've seen across our network was, owners making sure that their employees had access to online yoga classes, just the things that they needed to make sure that, that their employees were kept in their overall well-being was in consideration. I mean, you are only as good as you can be to provide care. You have to take care of yourself. And so I think our franchise owners across the network realize that of their employees and the extra going above and beyond to hang in there and hang tough and give all of themselves. So just being able to give back to the employees so they could continue to give to their elders was just huge.
And so brilliant. And it's got an elegant simplicity, doesn't it, as a strategy for supporting everything that everyone's experiencing. So important to make sure that people know that you've got their back, especially at times like these, but always. And I want to ask you too, Anne-Marie, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about some of the things you heard that really stood out to you from that dialogue with the elders that you engaged in conversation.
Yeah, it ran the gamut of people really talking about their own families and the incredible family support. And I could, relate to that even on a systems level of, I think sometimes we forget about the importance of the family, even if they're loved ones in a nursing home, how much that means, to care and care at home, all the way running the gamut to ways they've been scammed because the isolation of older adults and the scams that they endured. And, that heartbreaking, some elder abuse in particular with that. But I think the loudest voice was people saying that they miss connections and how do they get reconnected to a community in even ways that they didn't even understand what was important to them. I'll never forget one woman had said she goes to get coffee every morning and didn't realize how much the person at the coffee shop, who she didn't even know her name, meant to her. That she, would chit chat for 5 minutes each day and then didn't realize that person meant to her, but she said she thought about her for months. Mm. Like, I wonder what happened to her. I know she had a young daughter. What happened to the daughter? This is in the 5 minutes. Can I have a medium cup of coffee? But those kind of relationships matter to people and they miss them.
And I think that's just such a powerful statement and testament to the aspect of well-being. It's that connection piece. It is almost more valuable than half the medications that people take to combat, a lot of other illnesses. And so that connection is huge. And I am not surprised, Anne-Marie, that was a huge topic for our elders and possibly their family members with them, and how important it is and that we can't forget it. And I think is a strength during this time to tap into.
Thank you. Okay. So here we are. I'm curious. Success stories. What have you heard over the past 18 months that might inspire and renew commitment to person-directed practices, but in home care specifically? So, what are some of the success stories you heard that was like, wow, this stands out in the midst of a really challenging time? And how might my telling this story to somebody make a difference? Who wants to go first?
I'll start out. We heard so many heartwarming and actually tear-inducing stories over the time that unfolded. A couple examples were owners that would step in and go out and provide care, to be roll up their sleeves right alongside their care partners and fill in the gaps of care and just really putting themselves out there in a possibility of being exposed themselves, but just, leading by example. You have to be able to go into the trenches and do exactly what you're asking your employees to do. And so I think as great leaders, that was something that came out of it. They rolled up their sleeves and went out there when we had terrible weather during the pandemic. So there was layers and layers of things happening all at the same time. And that was one of the heartwarming stories, several of them that came out of the pandemic with regards to just people that don't normally provide care, just getting out there and making sure that coverage was there for the elders in their home. People that were spending the nights in the assisted living when the lights went out, making sure that elder had that person there to draw strength from. That was unique to the pandemic. Another really quick story came from one of our owners in California who said caregivers knew how important it was to get the elder out of the house when it was possible to get out and not be shut inside. So just adding additional walks around the neighborhood was something that was very heartwarming, getting people just out of those four walls and actually putting them in a car and maybe going for a drive up and down the coast or up in the hills just to get a different, fresh perspective, and just being able to see that there is still a world to be appreciated and enjoyed. So tons of other stories. And I'm sure that Anne Marie and Kaylee have some as well.
Similarly, for on our end, just watching, for us, it was watching our team step up for each other and step up for each other's elders they were working with. I mean, I saw meal trains happening. I was making foods. We were all taking turns delivering. We still are to this day for those who are still affected in some way. And just watching that inspiration and those stories unfold daily was really impressive. For Kevin and I, unfortunately, in kind of the heart of COVID, we lost our father very abruptly. And so we, as leaders, pulled out for a little while and supported in a much different way for a temporary time. And watching these care partners step up and lead for us and with us on that aspect. I don't know how we could have made it through that tragedy during that time without the strength of our team and their perseverance and their imagination and the elders that they were with. So yeah, Nicole, those stories were that's, I believe, really what carried us through and kept us wanting to go. And you're seeing it in the levels, I'm watching right now someone who works in the real estate entity, and they're getting people together to make meals for the nurses and the CNAs at the hospitals, and as they come out and come in, and it's incredible seeing those stories.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Nicole and Kaylee, which are great stories. I think the most heartwarming thing was really how individual people decided to just pick up and help others, and on a different level. I know in our community, and I'm sure many others, we came to community solutions faster than we ever have before. And I thought that was interesting. And I even remember one night, my congressman, I'll name him, Congressman Joe Morelli, I brought up a problem in one of these community problem-solving calls. And I said, I'm just so worried because we pay people's bills. And now, through use of staff and volunteers, and now we can't go in. It was the beginning of the pandemic. Aging services had no PPE at that point, and we still had people trying to get in. I said, I got to figure out how I'm going to pay all these people's bills. And he had an idea, so he called me at 8:00 at night, and he said, I want to be part of the solution here. But I thought that it was amazing how fast we could come up with problem solving and community solutions when we had to. And I keep hoping that that same kind of spirit, whether it's like Nicole said, the administrator doing direct line work, or on a larger effort, trying to figure out how to get food to everybody who needs food, we keep that spirit alive, and we can really, I think, move things when we need to move them. Because I think long-term care right now is broken. And maybe it's broken for a reason, because we have to put it back together the right way. And it's all incumbent upon us to do that, whether it's in skilled nursing, home care, or family care. we have to do it.
Well, that was a powerful end note. Although I just want to check in with you before we start to part ways. Is there anything that we haven't touched on today about the topic that any of you feel like needs to be shared? Or any advice to people in the home care space about something you would want to offer them that you feel like you've learned during this time?
I would leave this thought with people during this time is that it is probably more important than ever to really step back and, as we talked about, talk about direct care, is to sit back and really understand your staff, really understand your elders, not just where their thoughts are, where their heart is, and where they're getting information from, and realizing we have to communicate in such a different way and to really resolve a lot of the issues we're facing during this pandemic and with the broken system as it is. There are people that have the answers, that really have some knowledge that we're not tapping into. And we really just need to open our minds, let go of some of our agendas, and really listen to those voices and find out a new way to communicate with them. We can educate all we want, but if we don't understand who we're educating and what they need to hear and how they need to hear it, we're not going to get anywhere. So I think we're just in a place where we just really need to change the way we're communicating overall.
Love it. Anything else that anyone wants to add?
I'll add my flavor that I always like to add, and that is, people come to home care. The reason the phone rings is because, they need assistance because of a chronic condition. It's not usually a concierge service. So I like to say that we should build a care plan based on the unique needs of the individual. We do want to address what they come to home care with, whether it be dementia, a heart failure, but you put the disease in the back seat because they are a person first, and you put them in the front seat and you let them drive their care. And of course, we want to put our tasks and things that we do in home care to address that chronic condition, but we're not going to lead with that. And we need to never lose focus that we don't identify that person by their disease, but what brings them meaning and joy, and continue to build that into the plan of care so that they are still receiving all the goodness that we have to offer. I think a lot of times people shy away from taking on a client who has multiple chronic conditions because they're fearful that they're not able to address those things. People living with chronic conditions need the same things that people not living with them, and that is to make sure that their meaning and joy is incorporated into that plan of care. And I think it's our responsibility as home care providers to make the care we provide home-like.
Boy, I just couldn't say it better than that, Nicole. I mean, it really is about serving that person, and hopefully in looking at the person, we can figure out a system of care that focuses on the person rather than the system. So we'll take the Eden values, the Eden philosophy of person-directed, person-centered care, and let's run with it. Now is our moment.
Okay, love that. That was a powerful close. Glad I asked that question. Wow. And you didn't even have that one on your list. So nice. Thank you so much, all of you. So appreciated the conversation. It was rich. It was deep. Hopefully we'll touch a lot of people who are working in the home care field. And I'm sure we'll be talking again sometime. So thanks again.
Thank you.